from leftist position, truth is really just subjective, right? So there's your truth and my truth and, no. To the left, religion is just a social engineering device. I don't know how bad stuff's going to get in the next 5 years. I would like to think that everything would be fine, but the government seems to be doing a great job at going around and essentially destroying all of the infrastructure that a country depends upon. But they have now essentially grown to become monsters, in a sense.
Hello and welcome to Resistance GB. Today we're joined by expert on the left and the origins of wokeness, will we say, and the infiltration of all of the institutions, Christopher Carrion. Before we start, can I say thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon, and can I ask any of you who'd like to keep these great conversations coming to go and chuck us £3 a month, that's 70p a week, to help us continue doing what we do. But Chris, how would you like to introduce yourself?
I am more commonly known as Newsfist, which is a weird name, but I just sort of picked it when I started doing podcasting. I didn't realize 4 years later I'd still be doing it, so I'm sort of stuck with it. I do a twice weekly show, a news show called Happening TV. You can find it on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. It's, the news of the moment. And on Thursdays, I usually do a sort of more political focused show with Use the Unit called Empire of Lies, where we do a sort of like an hour on a complicated political topic, basically. What was the last one we did? I think Leninism and race communism or something like that. We've done anarcho-tyranny, Sam Francis. It's heavy kind of stuff, but sort of explained in a way that, the normal people can understand it, basically.
Today, we are going to be discussing the origins of the left and wokeness and the infiltration of the institution. So would you like to tell us, how did they take over all of the institutions and where does it all come from? Okay,
well, the modern incarnation that we're looking at is primarily a result of the aftermath of the New Left movement in the 60s, right? This was primarily the brainchild of Herbert Marcuse and other people in the Frankfurt School, such as Theodor Adorno. And this was sort of the movement that basically brought us the 60s, right? So, when you think of the 60s, the hippies and the mini skirts and all that kind of other stuff, but also the revolutionary violence, of which there was quite a bit, particularly in the US. And after the left was essentially defeated in the 60s, they then went on to infiltrate teaching, mainly, right? So the basic idea was borrowed from a guy called Antonio Gramsci, who was a sort of I guess you'd call him sort of like a post-Marxist in the sense, right? So Marx's original idea was that the revolution would first occur in industrialized countries. Okay, so he predicted that the revolution would first happen in countries such as England and Germany. And they nearly pulled it off in Germany, which resulted in the compromise of the Weimar Republic and then the rise of Mustache Man.
The Austrian painter.
Yes, the Austrian painter. But in England, it didn't really take off. So Gramsci, when he was languishing in prison, I think in Russia, wrote the prison diaries. I haven't read the whole thing, actually. I really probably should. But his theory diffused outwards. And Gramsci's theory basically was that the reason why the revolution didn't take off in countries such as Germany and England was primarily due to the middle class, right? So the middle class are happy. Things aren't perfect, but, they got a house, they got a Weber grill, they got a family, you know what I mean, right? They've got sports, they've got, television wasn't around then, but, and they are a brake on revolutionary energy.
Because they want the working class to take over.
Well, they say they want the working class to take over, but actually, if you do a bit more delving, the proletariat, as Marx envisions it, is not actually the peasants, right? When they love to say, oh, we want the farmers to revolt. But really, if you examine the concept of the term, the proletariat are the people that we would now recognize as the woke. They are the thought workers, the academics, the journalists. And indeed, they had a bit of a problem with getting the farmers to come along with this. And they noticed that actually a lot of the farmers were, I hesitate to say this, right-wing. They didn't want the revolution. So they came up with another word for them, which was the lumpen proletariat, right? Which was the part of the workers they didn't know, they didn't know what was for their own good. See what I'm saying, right? They resisted the revolution. And to go back to Gramsci's idea was this concept of hegemony, right? So hegemony was essentially the stabilizing force in society that prevented the revolution, or as people would call it nowadays, fascism, because in modern day, fascism is just anything that impedes the march of communism. That is what fascism really means, by the way, right?
Well, I mean, obviously, the true definition of fascism would be the Italian form of socialism deriving from syndicalism.
But now
they use it in that fashion.
Yes. It has now become a sort of catch-all phrase that in practical parlance means anything that stands in the way of the revolution. And you can see this being used as well. Back in the day, this is not a new development, right? They just, you just scream fascism at basically anyone and anything that is opposed to communism, right? So Gramsci thought of hegemony as composed of, I think it's 5 pillars. So there's education, law, religion. There are a couple of others. I can never get all 5 off the top of my head. But essentially, these were the stabilizing forces in society that had to be undermined. So Gramsci came up with this idea. Actually, I'm not sure if Gramsci came up with the idea of the long march of the institutions or whether this was a later addition. But the idea basically was that you get all these lefties to infiltrate all of the institutions that enforce hegemony, or as we would say nowadays, enforce white supremacy, right? Because in the modern world, what has basically happened is that communism, the fundamental part of it, which is called conflict theory, has transitioned from a basis on class to a basis on race, right? So now you have the whites as the bourgeoisie and everyone else as the proletariat. And, therefore we must, smash the bourgeoisie, smash whiteness, overthrow white supremacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So you're twice as bourgeois as me by their paradigm.
Yeah, something like that. Yes. And again, much like the traditional conception of the bourgeoisie, if you look at the kulaks.
And the kulaks, let's just say they were peasants who were ever so slightly more affluent and may have, had a little farm shop.
Yes.
And therefore they were dirty capitalists and they had to be killed because they'd betrayed their people.
Correct. They had a cow. Capitalists, right? But the thing about conflict theory and the way it's sort of applied is it becomes this sort of totalizing urge to just kill everyone who is opposed to your thing, right? This is the essential sort of message of conflict theory. You set up 2 groups, you elevate one over the other. This takes sort of many years of sort of deliberate brainwashing and massaging. And then once you get this whole thing set up where you can blame all the problems of society onto this one group, you are then poised for a revolutionary takeover and bloody violence. And we're seeing this, they're trying to set this thing up again based on race now. And this was, again, to go back to Gramsci or to Marcuse, the idea of the revolution. See, with the communists, it's always about revolution, right? But you've got to realize that the hardcore communists carry a lot of useful idiots along in their wake. And it's always very, very interesting. You see this in the Russian Revolution when the hangers-on, right? The left who think, I just want to be a good person. They are cajoled along with this idea of, we're going to make a fairer society. We're going to make things better. A lot of the time, they are deliberately making things worse, right? And I think, I don't know, Gramsci, Lenin was definitely on about this. So Lenin was all about this idea that you have to basically make things worse to thin out the middle class, right? The smaller the middle class, the more division, right? Because the middle class is essentially a buffer between the proper bourgeoisie, the powers of capital, I would say the money power, and, the poor peasant class, right? The middle class. And social mobility, of course, is a massive enemy of the revolution, because if a rich man can become poor and a poor man can become rich, then, why need the revolution? Why do you need mass action?
Because you've got a meritocracy.
Yes, but also, someone could just say, well, rather than slashing and burning our entire society, right, why don't I just work hard and, have a family and build up my farm or my business, and get wealthy. And they don't like this, you know what I mean, right? Because any ability to leap from one class to another class, right, disperses revolutionary energy. This, by the way, is one of the reasons why you are allowed to change sex, but you are not allowed to change race. So, you may notice this. If you're a man and wants to become a woman or vice versa, that is absolutely fine. If you're a white man who wants to become a black man, no, because you're diluting the revolutionary energy. The idea is to separate these two groups as much as possible, pit them to fight against each other, thin out the middle class, which is already done. I mean, you are biracial, I believe, but the actual number of biracial people, again, in race communism terms, is actually very, very thin. So it's much easier to get this conflict theory going. And the way Lenin expressed it was to crush the middle class between the twin millstones of inflation and taxation. And I think that's actually what we're seeing in this country at the moment. I regret to inform the audience that I think there is a very, very good chance that the people currently leading the UK are Bolsheviks in the traditional sense. And one of the reasons you can tell is because they lie. They lie about everything. They just, one of the standout features of the Russian Revolution, if you look at Lenin and the Bolsheviks, is they just lie about everything. It's like, what is this thing that we can say that will get us into power? Oh, just say it. They don't, once they got power, and Labour has been very, very much like that. They just said whatever they needed to say to get into power. Once they're in power, oh, did I say that? Did I?
So they say bread and peace, and then they say, okay, well, we went to peace with Germany, but we will gun you down in the streets and continue having a civil war, and there may not be any bread, but... Yeah, and kill all the Christians, of course, let's not forget that. And the kulaks.
And the kulaks.
For the cows.
Yeah,
and the Ukrainians.
Once these things get rolling, they're awfully hard to stop. Which of course is the idea. That's why they always go around lighting fires, because these things are a lot easier to. It's a lot easier to start a fire than it is to put it out, as it were. So yeah, we have a situation where we are sort of poised for another revolution. Except this time, as I said, instead of class war, it would be a race war, and it's looking pretty nasty, man. I'm not going to lie, I'm not a fan,
I don't want to have to fight myself.
Yes, well, indeed, we'll have to set up a cage match, Wilsey versus Wilsey, Wilsey the black versus Wilsey the white. Right? Maybe we can get you an Elon Musk brain chip, 2 Elon Musk brain chips, right? And we can isolate your white essence and your black essence and have you fight yourself. You know what I mean, right?
So why do you think it is that, well, you believe that race is the greatest metric for the left in terms of their takeover, but surely the premise of intersectionality that they hold is that it's not just race, it's race, and it's also sex, and it's also whether someone's got dysphoria, and it's also whether someone's a foreigner as well. Foreigners are privileged above us, unless you happen to be Australian, in which case you're just you don't count as a foreigner.
Clearly.
I mean, to be fair, this is your homeland. Well, I don't really count you as a foreigner.
But I'm white, so Now, look, intersectionality is just a reworking of Mao's red and black categories. Okay, so in Maoist China, you had a system where, depending on your parents, right, you would fall into either the red or the black categories. Again, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. I wish I had ChatGPT here. But essentially, if you were a good communist, if you were a peasant, you would be part of the red categories. The red categories obviously being good. If your parents were capitalists or kulaks or dissident academics, you would be part of the black categories. And all this really is just a way of defining the pecking order so that you can pit these groups against each other, number one. And so you can provide social and economic reasons for people to separate outwards. And of course, again, much like now, in Maoist China, hopping from one category to the other was very, very hard. So if you were in the black category, and I believe in Maoist China, it was like 2 generations. So if your parents had owned a farm or had been accused of capitalism, you were black unless you became a very, very decorated communist. It was very, very hard. Nowadays, of course, if you're white, the one way that you can leap the boundary is to become trans or non-binary, which is, of course, one of the reasons why so many people are doing it, because all the messaging is trying to solidify these red and black categories. Now, you can't blame people, given the choice environment, given the incentive structure, wanting to leap from a category where they are universally derided and blamed for every single bad thing that had ever happened in the history of the entire world, to a category where, well, they might still be white, but at least they're gay or trans or non-binary. So, they're kind of okay. It's not a good situation.
So you talked about how they infiltrated the 5 pillars, including education. You said education was their primary infiltration. Yeah. I take it you've seen the interview with Lord Pearson about how he tried to get on the Teacher Training Council for Britain.
No, I haven't seen it.
I believe it was with Carl Benjamin, and Lord Pearson said, I believe it was Lord Pearson, to my memory, that he was interested in education, he was in the Tory government, etc., and he wanted to be involved. Mm-hmm. So he kept trying, they kept rebuffing him, and eventually got on, and he looked around this full cabinet of people, this full council, and went, everyone's communist.
Yes. Well, the stuff that's going on in education is bloody horrific. So there's been a big infiltration of the teachings of this guy, Paulo Freire, I believe his name is. He was a Portuguese educator who was close with Don Geraldo Camara, the Red Bishop of Recife. Thank you, James Lindsay, for all of his excellent work on this. Highly recommended. Now, Freire came up with this idea called, I think it was him that came up with the idea of critical pedagogy, right? Which is basically how to make children into communists, how to indoctrinate children. And the technique that they use is a thing called generative themes, okay? So imagine you are trying to teach a physics course, for example, right? So instead of teaching about electricity, you frame it as, is it fair that some people have electricity and some don't? Let's discuss, right? So you frame every single thing in these concepts of equity, fairness, and in some cases, you just downright terrify the hell out of the children. There have been many, many accounts, particularly in the US, of teachers just downright showing horrible stuff to their kids. There have been notable cases of teachers separating the children into black and white and getting the white kids to apologize to the black kids. This is the kind of stuff I mean, right? This kind of educational program cannot help but fracture society, which of course is the entire goal. Imagine going through, and you're seeing this. The children that have gone through this, of course, are growing up to be much more extreme on both angles. So you're getting black nationalists, you're getting like white nationalists, because rather than focusing on anything that brings people together, on any kind of universalist message, instead you're focusing entirely on race. Have I mentioned the left are the real racists? I mean, it's such a commonly made point at the moment. There are a lot of people who would be quite happy to just let the race thing go. But the left, they just can't. They're so hyper focused on it. It's like all they know now. It's terrible. I would really, and a lot of people that I know would like to go back to what academic agent termed back to Fresh Prince, which is this idea of going back to the 90s when you were able to make sort of good-hearted racist jokes to each other. You'd be like, you're black and I'm white. Let's make a couple of off-color jokes and then go down to the pub and have a pint and actually, sort of celebrate our differences in a, sort of lighthearted kind of, ribbing sort of way. But events have now progressed, and the rise of mass immigration has made this a lot harder. It's one thing when your culture is sort of mostly intact and you're being asked to make a few allowances for a few people and, you've got a humanist message. But when you're in a situation where entire areas have just been basically replaced with foreigners and no one speaks the language, it is a lot harder. And of course the Labor government and all the commies are like, it's far right to point out that population's being replaced. Well, if it's far right to use your eyeballs and to see what is, literally in front of you, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, is truth not a right-wing value?
You could, I think you could make that argument, actually, yeah. I mean, look, honestly, yes. From the purely leftist position, and there's been a lot of very tedious philosophy and postmodernism about this. From leftist position, truth is really just subjective, right? So there's your truth and my truth and, no. Now,
truth is singular, its versions are mistruths.
What started as probably a reasonable attempt to look at different peoples and cultures and say, the things that people believe shape their actions, and therefore you can sort of make an argument that in the abstract sense, so you'll have two groups that both look at history in a different way. You could say those are their truths. It has now gotten to the point where you have a number of people just basically arguing there is no such thing as external reality. It's essentially anti-positivism in a sense. Now, I would challenge such people that...
they should maybe try playing in the traffic and see how, their imagination deals with reality.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's
60 miles an hour.
It's basically magical thinking, really. I think this is also given a concomitant rise to, mysticism and affirmations and, all this kind of other stuff that have taken the place of organized religion. And of course, organized religion, being one of the 5 pillars, has been massively subverted. I mean, look at the Anglican Church. I mean, can you even call that Christianity anymore? When you've got a gay vicar, I went to this thing a couple of Easters ago, actually, where I was at this church. And it was on Easter. There were 2 gay guys up the front with a foam cage with some of the bars bent. And they were basically explaining the parable of the empty tomb as a story about a rabbit that had escaped its cage. Made me very angry. I wasn't even particularly religious at the time. I was just, man, I don't even know what this is. This is very, very wrong. Yeah, it's been completely subverted. And speaking of the Anglican Church, now that they've ditched Justin Welby, I think there is an assumption or a hope among many people that the person that replaces him will be less woke. But no, the person who replaces him is going to be even more woke, right? There's, and then after her, it's definitely going to be a her. It'll probably be an immigrant, and then after that, it'll be even more woke, probably.
It'll be a Muslim.
Yes. I mean, that would be the inevitable endpoint, wouldn't it?
I mean, it sort of, furthers the case for disestablishmentarianism of the church. Yeah,
it kind of does. I think it makes the case of, I think of it a bit like GitHub. So you need to revert to a previous version of the code. Essentially, right?
So, it's like, you've got a previous saved version and you're reset back to factory standards or...
traditional Catholicism, Orthodox Christianity...
Oh my God, please don't. No, well, look, my friend, okay. reverting to that is to surrender our sovereignty to Rome, is it not?
Well, I'm not a Catholic. Okay, so I'm Orthodox, and one of the advantages of the Orthodox Church is that rather than having a pope, they have a bunch of sort of little churches in each country
With patriarchs.
Yeah, with patriarchs, right? I think there's a lot to that, because the problem with having a structure where you have a single ruler is if that single ruler gets subverted, many people believe that Pope Francis, that has happened, the whole structure underneath it becomes compromised. I mean, just look at the Borgia popes, or, not medieval Italy,
Renaissance.
16th, 17th century Italy, and all the stuff going on with the popes there.
Which Alexander was it?
Oh, I can't remember. The papal history is amazingly it's like, it's like the biggest soap opera like ever recorded.
Yeah,
basically.
the Pope's in there with all of his bastard children.
Yeah. Poisoning people left and right,
And the children are meant to be incestuous and whatnot, and then. Oh.
But again, how much of this is real and how much of this is propaganda? Because at that point,
I mean, it is the Catholic Church.
Yes, but my point still stands. They wouldn't have let gay people be priests, or
But is that the main focus in and of itself? Because it seems like it's just a general push of socialism which worries me more so. I mean, obviously there have always been homosexual priests; they just have to hide it. It's not one of the core tenets of the Ten Commandments. To me, it's the fact that they have, they're clearly interceding on a political level.
Yes.
And they shouldn't be interceding on a political level because that is beyond their jurisdiction. It's essentially, the state putting its hand on the scales to tip elections. And it seems like they've sort of been taking these, fairly right-wing elderly people and just, they're just sort of, co-opting them away from actually standing up for their values of their country. And, they're just being lectured by people who have nothing in common with them at all.
You've read Dune, right?
To be fair, I've only read the first half. I didn't like the way it was written.
Blasphemy. Okay, so in Dune, which is a sci-fi novel by Frank Herbert, for the listeners, read it. It's very, very good.
I love the films. I've got to say, and I feel the films consummated the vision that was there in the book, which...
You mean the recent ones or the original one?
Delis Villeneuve, recent.
I have issues. But anyway, right, this is beside the point. So you will be familiar with the Bene Gesserit. Okay, so the Bene Gesserit were a sort of secretive group of psychic nuns, essentially, right, that were doing a sort of controlled breeding program to bring about the Messiah. And one of the things that they would do is they would go to previously uncontacted planets and they would spread these prophecies and stuff like that. And the idea was that if any Bene Gesserit operative were ever stranded on one of these planets, right, they would essentially have the keys to the minds of the population. And an often underappreciated subplot in Dune is that the rise of Paul Muad'Dib was actually the fulfillment of a prophecy that was supposed to be fake. Now, the reason I bring this up is that to the left, religion is just a social engineering device, right? Because they don't believe that there's anything to it, right? To them, the only function of religion is to make people think certain things, make people behave certain ways. And this is why they are sublimating the church in the way that they are doing.
You say that, but would you not agree with James Lindsay that they trend towards a certain conception of Gnosticism?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But they have a very weird idea about religion. It's very, very... So my opinion, basically...
Their value is power. That's the thing that they value. So they view religion through the prism of power, and they only see everything as a power structure. It's like, I have power here, I have power here, I do this, and I control a person through that. Yes,
and that they can escape the prison of the world is the other thing. So look, my personal opinion on this is that everyone has religion, right? Religion is a deep brain structure that codes for salience, right? So if you look at... Someone throws 100 different colored stones on the ground in front of you, right? Various people will pick out various patterns from these stones from this noise, right? That is salience, right? If you look at 1,000 historical events, some of them will appear more important than others, and you will construct a narrative. You can't get around this. Humans are narrative creatures. This is a fundamental way about how humans think. So everyone has religion, right? The only difference is that many people, their religion is essentially to not have religion, if you know what I'm saying. Religion is sort of it's the first page in a novel, right? It's the creation myth. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Because every novel has to have a first page, and everybody has one. The question, I guess, is whether you choose it deliberately or whether you have it thrust upon you. And the left have a religion that is, a lot of them are, the trust the science TM types, right? So they're pure materialists. But again, if you get down to it, the universe sprang from nothing. Where did it come from? Well, they don't like to think about that too much. You know what I mean, right? The important part is that, there's nothing out there. And yet at the same time, a lot of these people, they also engage with a lot of weird mystical woo. It's a very, very strange paradox. They claim they believe in nothing beyond this world, and yet at the same time they do stuff like positive affirmations, or they believe in liberating the self, all this kind of other weird stuff.
Well, this is one of the problems. Like when you remove Christianity, you remove the dominant philosophical structure in a way, apart from liberalism, of course. Then what you leave is essentially a void. And you leave a void of community. And I personally believe that, as an atheist, I believe that void can be filled with community, but it needs to be fashioned in a certain way, and it's got a lot to learn from Christianity. Not to become Christianity, but to be able to replace it. Because if you literally have nothing there, there's a void, and a void sucks things in, right? And what it's done is it's sucked in all of this horrible, totalitarian ideology.
Yeah, well, this is the problem with liberalism, fundamentally, is that it is powerless in the face of communism, unfortunately.
You say that.
I do say that. I do say that because the sort of the liberalism that we have now, I realize there are different shades, right? You have to define some kind of edge, right, to your society, right? Whether it be nation or race or religion, or you have to have some kind of edge, at which point you say these people are us, these people are not us. Now, of course, the left are fundamentally against this. They call it othering, the idea that there is an us and them, despite, of course, engaging massively in exactly the same practice.
Exactly. So I would see that as more of a rhetorical tactic by the left than an inherent core part of their ideology. They're just saying it. Like, if you actually look at their actions, I would say they are the ultimate otherers. Whereas if you look at someone like me, who's a liberal nationalist, I draw a line. I say, okay, these are the borders of my country. These are the people who belong within the borders of my country. Other people outside of my country, I've got no issue with them. Just don't invade.
I don't know, mate. Sounds a bit racist to me. No, but like the point I'm trying to make is that the kind of people that you are against will take an edge case, right? And they will stick a thing in and they'll wiggle it and wiggle it and wiggle it and wiggle it until that edge case falls apart. And since there are always going to be edge cases, this is one of the reasons why liberalism is so susceptible to communism. The sort of belief in equality that is in the fundamental part of liberalism, unfortunately, is very, very easily hijacked by the communists.
When you say equality, that means equality before the law. I think that what the left is doing is they're trying to steal liberalism. Right? They're basically taking liberalism. They're nothing to do with it. Killing it, right? Flaying it and wearing its skin as a human skin suit and walking around pretending to be liberalism. Sure. I think the ultimate thing is,
and why could liberalism not defend itself?
Because of socialist infiltration, I would say. So you've said that this all came from the 1960s. Mm-hmm. And what I would posit is that actually it's a much older tradition when you look at the Fabian Society. So I don't know, like, do you want to talk a little bit about the Fabian Society and where that's come from?
Sure. I mean, the Fabian Society goes way back. It's been a while since I read Fabian Freeway, actually. But again, you have this sort of similar kind of stuff. The original impulse behind the Fabian Society was this idea of incremental socialism as opposed to revolutionary socialism. So when they realized that the revolution wasn't going to happen in places like England, they were like, well, what if we get to the revolution by these like small incremental steps? And I don't know if this is pre or post Gramsci, but it basically comes down to the same idea, sort of, infiltrating governments. And again, I mean, look, you could argue that
their symbols as well.
Yeah, the wolf in sheep's clothing, and the world on an anvil, being heated, and then hammered into the heart's desire, I believe is the actual phrase from the Fabian window, right? Now, you could argue that certain parts of the left have given us some good things, the NHS, labor unions, these kinds of like stuff, the post-war consensus.
Oh my God.
But
please no.
But they have now essentially grown to become monsters, in a sense.
Would you not say that those things are inherently a problem? I mean, the post-war consensus was what essentially tore this country apart and destroyed our empire.
Yes.
The NHS is the National Homicide Service, which kills people. And was the third one that was in there?
Labour unions.
I've got nothing against someone having a private union, but the problem is all of the unions, more or less, are actually state entities.
Yeah.
Because they all work via the state system, and if they don't work via the state system, then they don't get all of the state privileges, which basically makes them useless, and they operate upon a mode of having government privilege. So if you want to set up a private union, you can't go on strike when you want, but they can, because they're given a privilege by the government.
Yeah.
So again, these are all sort of older privileges, and I mean, who could argue that these were good?
Well, I mean, the workers, probably. I don't know. I mean, what, you want to go back to the guild system? I mean,
I mean, once you have a free market, I mean, if people want to set up private guilds, they can set up private guilds. The only problem with the private guilds is the private guilds are like big business socialism, because what they did was they basically said they would have a lot of money. They would all club together, and they would make sure that they paid off whoever the lord or the burghers were in the town, that only they could practice that profession, thus creating a sort of monopoly for their organisation, which is an oligopoly between them, being able to lower standards, raise prices, and basically shaft everyone. I mean, the guilds were in many ways holding back the progress of society, although I will give them credit that the power of the guilds did limit the power of the nobility, because they formed together to make common interest groups, which actually helped to protect some free market, whilst at the same time also harming the free market.
And they also produced incredible works of art and craftsmanship, which then bumped up against the need for mass production. I mean, I don't know. It's, going back into history is useful, but we sort of have to look at where we are now, right? In terms of the Fabian Society, which you were asking about, the problem I think with the Fabians is that eventually they have to shit or get off the pot, right? So for, I don't know, 150 years, the Fabians have been going around saying, we're going to have the revolution, guys. We're going to have the revolution, right? But just softly, catchy monkey, right? At a certain point, you have to make a grab for the monkey, right? And I suspect, I do not know this, but I suspect that what happened is that within the Fabian establishment, there developed two groups. One group, it was basically virtue signaling about the revolution. Oh, yes, we're going to, someday, comrade, we're going to have the revolution. And then another group who are like, well, when? When are we going to have the revolution? When are we going to have the revolution? You guys are just splitters. You don't really care about the revolution, right? We got to have the revolution. And my suspicion is that a lot of this sort of UN 2030 sustainability kind of stuff is basically their revolution. It's the revolution that they want. They're always banging on about
That's
classic
it. The final Marxist solution.
Yes, yeah, essentially, right? You know, equality for all, sustainability.
Own nothing, be happy.
Yeah, own nothing, be happy. You know, every country will have the same GDP, which is basically, by the way, what they're doing to the first world. The idea is that the UK will have a standard of living about equal to Jamaica. I hope you're looking forward to that.
Well, not. I mean, I might as well move to Jamaica because
exactly.
At least there'd be good weather.
Hey, man, why move to Jamaica when Jamaica could just come to you, right? Yeah, not a fan.
Time to tool up, I say.
Yes, make sure that your combat spoon is well oiled. In fact, I do believe under the current regime that even carrying a spoon, if it's intended to be used in any way as a weapon, is actually illegal. My understanding of the legal regime in the UK is anything that you have, if it's intended to be used as a weapon, is therefore illegal. You know, so perhaps an assault sponge. You know,
but
right?
If you intended to use
right, but you can't do much damage, right? I mean, you could sort of tickle them mildly.
So they've marched through the institutions, and obviously they've pulled the ladder up behind them. And you think that now we're coming to the point in, the century or more long plan to take over everything and turn it into a totalitarian socialist state, one world as well, just so there's no escaping.
Well, except for Trump. Right? If he gets into office, 2030 it's dead.
When you say if he gets into office,
yes,
you're looking at the number of assassinations.
Well, look, we're not at January 6th yet.
Isn't it 20th?
I think the confirmation is it the 6th or the 7th? Or the 20th? I don't know.
Is it 20th? Maybe the 20th is for all of the
whenever he is formally inaugurated, right? Up until now, between now and then, Trump has just published his cabinet picks, people like RFK, amazing people.
Ramaswamy,
Musk, all of these people.
Doge is now official.
This is going to be the death of 2030. There is not enough capital floating around the rest of the first world to support the capital base that would be necessary to have a global government to do the kind of transformational stuff that they want to do. They need the United States and all the money that they are sucking out of it. So, I mean, look, just the COP 29 conference, they reckon they need 11 trillion a year.
And Russia as well is not favourable to this necessarily. I know people say, Putin's on the WF website, and obviously Putin's not it doesn't believe in the free market. He is totally
persona non grata at the WF now.
They have been invading, or at least, well, they had a coup in Ukraine and took over a bunch of Russian-speaking territories with their puppet colour revolution. So I guess if you've not got America, you've not got Russia, and you've got allies like Argentina who will also be standing up against this sort of thing, it may be dead.
Well, it comes down to Europe essentially, and there's not that much money that you can extract from Europe anymore because they've literally driven the entire continent into the ground, and it's getting much worse.
Meanwhile, the EU has been undermined by us escaping.
Well, you say that, but it doesn't seem like it.
I mean, we semi-escaped. Which is the biggest blow to their prestige. It's like the jewel in their crown.
My theory, actually, well, one of my theories on this actually is that possibly one of the reasons they're destroying the farmers is so they will have an excuse to rejoin the EU common market. They'll be like, oh, well, prices are so high. We can't, we've got no food. Because you destroyed all the farmers and you jacked up the energy prices and you destroyed all the coal-fired power plants. Oh, well, I guess we'll have to rejoin the EU. Shucks. Wish we didn't have to, except, of course, if the UK rejoins, we'll have to adopt the euro and we won't have a seat at the table and we'll basically be like, a satrapy.
Basically, rejoining the EU at this point now basically seems impossible because once you tell people they'd have to join the euro, the polls just don't stack up.
Sure. But this is, look, do you look at the government at the moment and think they give a damn about the polls?
I'm not saying about the polls. I'm saying that you cannot join the EU without joining the euro. If you cannot join the EU without joining the euro, you couldn't move Britain onto the euro because you'd be absolutely decimated by Farage in the next election.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Farage would then, go about repoundifying, and who knows, an opportunity for a gold standard.
I mean, maybe. I don't know how bad stuff's going to get in the next 5 years. I would like to think that everything would be fine, but the government seems to be doing a great job at going around and essentially destroying all of the infrastructure that a country depends upon. And then at the same time being like, oops, did I do that? I hate this formulation. It's like everyone looks at the government like they're a 9-year-old child who's like, oh, whoops, I didn't realize if I pushed the vase off the shelf, it would shatter. Right? And you're like, yes, well, if you push the vase off the shelf, it will shatter. And they do it again and they do it again. And every single time they're like, oh, did I do that? I had no idea that by, gutting our power system, energy prices would go up. I had no idea that by importing like millions and millions of people from like across the world, social cohesion would disintegrate. Whoops, who could have foreseen such a thing? I am of the position now that it is basically deliberate. I cannot... You would literally have to have a government filled with people of an IQ lower than 70 to seriously believe that they have no idea that these are the outcomes that they're engineering.
I mean, they do have David Lammy.
That is true. He's black, by the way. Did you hear?
Oh, really?
Yes, really. Yes. He's black. Yes.
Do you know what? He really should mention it so I could.
I know. He's just so quiet about it.
So they're going for their ultimate power grab. They're trying to take control of absolutely everything. In your view,
yes.
You think this is the final takeover of their very long scheme.
Yes.
They've got to, catch the monkey at some point. What do we do then? What is the best action for each individual person to take in order to try and avoid this 2030 complete takeover?
I would say be self-reliant, try and make commercial connections with people that are still growing stuff, raw milk, local farmers, all that kind of other stuff. So I don't think that violence is going to help anything. In fact, if you check out newsfist.net and go to Users channel and watch Empire of Lies, one of the episodes I did was on a concept called sixth generational warfare, right? So just a slight aside. So fifth generational warfare is this sort of nebulous term that it means a lot of things to different people, but essentially it's when you have an opposing sort of military group hiding within a civilian population. So you could say that Hamas is engaging in fifth generational warfare, right? There are a lot of other interpretations. The situation that we exist now really is sixth generational warfare, which is one after, where all serious nodes of opposition to the government have been completely eradicated. No one wants to join any possible nodes of resistance because they're most likely infiltrated. And what you basically have is a situation where the government is just making war upon its own citizens. And in order to drive this, it's entirely possible that the government might actually make its own opposition movements, or, they will take people like, Tommy Robinson, for example, and be like, look at Tommy Robinson standing there supporting Israel and, having all those like white people at a rally, the far right, we must crack down. They already have essentially complete dominance. Any serious pushback, I think, is just going to be counterproductive. Now, look, I know that's not what a lot of people want to hear, but I think that is the situation. I think the most likely outcome, the good ending, is that the Americans come and bloody save us, to be perfectly honest. If Trump gets in, he could quite simply, when they're doing the trade tariff negotiations, come out and say, well, if you want to be inside our 0% trade partnership, you've got to start acting like a Western democracy again. If you're acting like a Western democracy, you've got to stop locking your people up for like saying stuff, right? And you've got to have like actual rule of law. Now, that could be perfectly done. America used to go all around the world and throw their weight around.
Well, to be fair, Trump is British.
Sure.
So he's one of us.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've got to go full queue, black pill, then wait for Trump to save us. It is an interesting ending. Where can everyone find you?
So you can find me at newsfist.net is where I've got all of my links. My SEO is terrible on YouTube, but you can find me on Rumble and Odyssey, but you can find all of my links at newsfist.net. Come along to my show, Happening TV, on Monday and Thursday nights at 8 p.m. London time. We have a very, very comfy chat, highly recommended. News of the day, plus funny videos, some cute animals, a bit of cringe to soothe the soul. It's a fun time.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Cool.
Cheers.
For more exclusive behind-the-scenes content, please be sure to subscribe to our Patreon. It really helps us cover the cost of any live streams, events, protests, or anything that we do. You'll also be seeing any behind-the-scenes footage and anything that we might be doing with Defiance Records.
Some of the key figures in the movement as you've never seen them before, painted by me, Jake Fern, with half of my brain concentrating on making a painting and half of my brain concentrating on having a conversation. Do I succeed at either or both? You be the judge. Tune in on Tuesday the 17th of December for the first instalment of Resistance GB's 1,000 Words with David Icke.
Oh, there you go. Oh, that's far better than I thought. Where's good? Hello. This is great.
Hi, my name's Emma Dunwell. Please join me every Thursday at 7 p.m. for the Resistance podcast, where I'll be interviewing people from the political world, carnivore world, vegan world maybe, music guests, and just a bit of everyone. No topic is off the table.